Prime Video's Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 is eligible for this year's Emmy Awards in so many categories. It's so exciting. So we thought we would assemble the creative team behind the acclaimed series. So I'm Matt Noble from Gold Derby, joined by Alex Disenhof, the cinematographer, Barrie Gower, the prosthetic designer, Kristian Milsted, the production designer, Luca Mosca, the costume designer, Joel Skinner, the editor, and Jason Smith, the visual effects supervisor. I wanted to kick off by asking you guys, in Middle-earth, the rings is where people get power. When you're making this show, where do you get your power from? Alex, we'll start with you.
Well, that's a good question. I think it all starts with the people you're working with. We've assembled a great team here, and to take on something of this scale, everyone is working at the top of their game, and everyone's really collaborating. I talk to these guys constantly, particularly Kristian and Jason, daily, as we're prepping for a season and throughout the shoot. Everything we do, everything that I shoot, and Barrie and Luca put in front of the camera, and Joel edits, everybody has a piece of the puzzle. It's community art making.
Where do we get our power? I have a very evil ring I wear. No, I take inspiration in the same way Alex said, from my coworkers, but I also take inspiration just from the fact that we are privileged to be in this world, in the world of Middle-earth, because it was a big deal to me, for my whole life. And when you get a small slice of that world handed to you and with the instruction to not break it, it's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of excitement and a lot of responsibility felt by everybody. And it just makes it a lot of fun. It feels like a huge privilege. So I think that a little power comes from that.
Well, I think I'd echo what Jason said in that, this was a dream job for me. I was a real Tolkien fanatic when I was a kid. Just, read the Silmarillion when I was 8, read Lord of the Rings when I was 7. And when I got the opportunity to do this show, I couldn't have been sort of more over the moon. And so every morning when the rushes come in and I get to see yesterday's filming from Middle-earth, it's like being a kid again. I don't need to take a jolt of coffee or anything like that, because I just want to delve right in every single morning.
It's very inspiring being surrounded by people who all feel that way, I have to say. Like, they've got their own stories, we all do, but it's a pretty great thing. I mean, down to the individual artists, at the individual vendors that we use for visual effects. There are a lot of people have made their way to this show on purpose because it's a special place to them.
And I get my power from my team, like you guys. As I was thinking before, it is very empowering and also disempowering to be surrounded constantly by people who are better than yourself in your team, in your crew, and in the adjacent crews where you work with all these excellent. Everybody can do things at such a high level of sophistication. They have so much expertise. And so going to work becomes like going to a museum, to a new museum that you have never seen before. And there's so much to take in, to learn. And that's where I really got my power from.
Yeah, I think I can echo what everybody said, really, especially, echoing what Luca's just said. I think it's very much team. It's you're only as good as your team. And I think we're all surrounded by, industry, top of the level professionals, really. And it's, I don't think there's really, there's very few shows and franchises you can become a part of which are such a just a collab. It's such a creative, vast. It's such a palette of creative characters for us in the special makeup effects, really. And it's like a bucket list, really, for us. The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and it's something that everybody's echoed here. Is like something I've
growing up, the start of my career, I looked to the original trilogy of films, and I was a huge fan of those, and a huge fan of the books as well. And I think it's it's very rare that you get to work on a show with makeup effects where it's almost every character on the show has got some form of rubber in some way or other glued to their face, and we're very commonly part of a show which we might do little guest appearances. We might have somebody wearing a nose, or we might have a creature or something like that. Not on this show. It's I'd say like 95% of the cast on this show have some form of prosthetics on them, and to be able to work with an incredibly talented crew in our department, but just a plethora of incredibly talented people across the whole production is, that's where we get our power from. Really, it's just like all this talent everywhere. I think mentally, we get our power from all the creative people around us, and I think physically, the hours we do in makeup effects, we definitely get our power from coffee, I think. So usually up to about our 4th, 5th coffee by about 11 a.m.
There's also a part of it that's not wanting to let anybody down. Like, I imagine myself as a fan, and so many of the things that we're tasked with are things I never would have imagined being tasked with. And there's a feeling of unworthiness, but then, having to step in and do my best job so that the fan version of me that's out there watching this show can feel like, okay, they did it justice. this small part of Middle Earth was done well.
I think it is a huge job that we undertook for season 2, and I think there's nothing that you can do on your own in this industry. It is literally working out, like, lots of different cogs in a big machine needs to work all together really well. There's not really room for egos here. It's just a matter of trying to, each department will try to working as hard as possible to come up with some really great and innovative and new angles to do this great story justice. I think it's, and then we are working with some really amazing showrunners and producers who are very supportive, and as you know, Barrie and everybody here do crazy hours to get this project to look as amazing as possible. We feel very supported, and I think that's having the support to take a few risks here and there, and then other departments backing up on ideas and try to make them work, and then pushing boundaries where we can is what we try to do, and having the opportunity to work on something where you can push boundaries technically and creatively, and the crafts that we engage, all the specialists that we have in the art department, in construction, going down to plasterers, painters, model makers, modelers, sculptors. It's just, I feel so blessed and incredibly lucky to work with these people who have been in the film and TV industry for many years. It's fantastic to use new technologies and very classic and old technologies like plaster molds and ceiling backings and all these kind of things. And mixing it all up was fantastic, and feel privileged to have been part of it.
What you talked about the challenge of how season 2 is a big challenge, Kristian. What do you guys think the biggest challenge? Like, maybe what scene was the biggest challenge for you to work on in season 2?
I think there's not one scene or not one. I think possibly the biggest challenge for season 2 and the same for season 1 was to make sure that we are kind of working on 4 different universes at the same time. You have the dwarves, you have the elves, you have the different human species, and then you have the little people, and then you have Sauron and his vast army and his striving for power to make him bigger and bigger. Each and every different little kind of sub universe have its own look. So for me, I felt sometimes like I was working on 4 feature films at once. It is so just creatively trying to bring each world alive, at the same time as making, you want to make them distinct from each other because you're jumping from story to story quite a lot. But at the same time, you don't want to confuse the audience. You want to make sure that you support the audience, put them in a comfort zone so they feel looked after visually, but at the same time, they need to be challenged. Obviously, you want to challenge your audience visually, and I think that's a tightrope walk that is the most exciting part of, I think, for all of us. All the HODs have this challenge in that we want to make the world as big as possible, but we also don't want to make people it doesn't take much to alienate an audience in terms of like when you break kind of a visual bond, and saying, well, now I don't know where I am. It could be as easy as that. So that's what every job has, that kind of tightrope walk. But I think with this season 2, it was like doing 5 jobs at the same time, and that was fun and challenging.
It's like doing a sleight of hand card trick where each one of us is one finger on the hand, and we're all trying to, in concert with each other, come in and collaborate just at the right time. There's so much creative problem solving on this project. There's more creative problems than I'm used to, and it's generally cross-discipline. There's so many times on this project that I'm talking to Alex or Barrie, or I'm over at Luca's place, definitely bothering Joel all the time, and then Kristian and I are attached to the hip. I mean, it's a blast. I don't know why it's that way, actually. Like, why is Tolkien's world so well suited to this nice combination of like practical things and the imaginary? But it makes it a lot of fun, actually.
Jason, can you think of a problem you had to solve in season 2?
Oh yeah, we had a battle. That's one big one. That was a big one. I think, though, that, let me just say, even though the battle was probably the largest problem, and that's the answer to the question, and I just got it correct. What I'd probably say is the Ents, because that I heard that we were going to do Ents like more than a year before the season, and after that, every hike I would look at every tree, and they all had something to say to me about how they should look and what I should do and shouldn't do, and that was a long journey. That asset, those 2 assets, were in progress for better part of 2 years. If you can imagine that, like from design and building the assets and testing, and that doesn't work, and then doing it again. I'm very proud of that, but it was a long journey.
Jason and I walked forests after forest looking for eyes and mouths and limbs. Say, look, there's an eye there. There's an eye there. Yeah. There's a mouth there. Can you have more eyes than 1 or 2 or 4?
Yes.
It was a thing, Jason. It was a thing.
They can even have 2 mouths. That's one of the things that we finally decided, is that we didn't want it to look like trees with masks. So we said, you know what? They're just gonna be trees, and if I see a face and you see a face and they're different, well, that tree has both of those. So there's even a scene that most people haven't caught where one of the tree, with the Ents, goes from a pretty upset face to a little patient and maybe considering and kind of friendly face, and that's 2 different mouths in one shot. If you watch it, it's very subtle the way it happens, but she's very upset, and then as it relaxes, the next time the mouth opens, it's this other, that's more inclined to happiness. We let them be trees, but it was what a challenge. That was a lot of fun.
Can anyone else think of a challenge or a problem they had to address in this season?
Yeah, I one scene I really love from the season is our our episode 8 battle with our Balrog in the King Durin's final leap, and I feel like it's a good scene that highlights the interplay between our departments. On paper, when you read something like that, everyone kind of has to scratch their heads a little bit, like, okay, how are we going to do this? This 40-footer. How tall was he, Jason? You know how tall he is.
I've forgotten the exact figure, but it's about 38, 40. Yeah.
Let's say 40-foot tall fire monster. And as a scene partner, for our real actors, and so when we were putting the scene together and we were envisioning it, Kristian and his department had to figure out, okay, well, first of all, where are we going to build this? We just from a practical perspective, we were pretty much out of stage space, and you kind of cobbled together this great corner of a set. We realized story-wise what we needed from this kind of cliff edge. We walked it many times in terms of we talked about how steep is steep, what do the actors need, what kind of access would I need for my camera and my lighting equipment. Jason was iterating different designs for our Balrog, and then on the day, figuring out how do we let our actors interact with this thing, and then how do I, in photography, give Jason what he needs and Joel what he needs to to kind of make a scene and to bring the Balrog to life. And so one thing I did on the lighting side is we essentially built a 40-foot tall tower of lights that we could control remotely, and we could basically, when the Balrog was lower, the lights would be lower, and then the lights would literally climb up the tower and get brighter and brighter and brighter. And then, when it fell back for a moment, it sinks back down, and then it goes back up. And we had like 6 different cues for where the Balrog was in space. And I could slide the towers. I had 2 of them, basically, and I could slide them apart to make sure that when we were behind our actors, the towers weren't intersecting their hair, so Jason could get a clean key. There's all these things that we were thinking about. And then what it allowed the actors to do was understand where they were looking and what the Balrog was doing.
I think that was huge, actually. Just the effect it had on them,
Yeah, and then it gave you the interactive lighting you needed to kind of to be able to seat the Balrog in a real world. And so all of those things had to come together to make this scene work. And it became a really emotional scene. And then obviously, I mean, Barrie, the prosthetics on the dwarves are incredible, and Luca costumes. I mean, they're actually some of the most fun people to light in our show because they have so much texture. So
that's the one scene, but you could do that for every scene where you almost go down the departments, and it's like just the stellar work at every level. Because that one, even though it was a creature of shadow and flame that we did, Ryan and team doing special effects, they were in there, giving us embers and pumping in smoke, and everybody was kind of like,
we had an LED whip, right? We had an LED whip that would, and then Joel cutting that together must have been tricky because you're cutting off of nothing, essentially. You're cutting off a light tower. So
yeah, I mean, editorially, the challenge is a kind of a combination of all the different things that you guys have been seeing in the balancing different stories, which, as Kristian was saying, you've got 5 or 6 different worlds or areas that you're kind of trying to balance. You've got, which sometimes makes it easier because you think, well, I'm kind of done with this story. Now we can move to another story. So it helps from the sense of moving things along, but at the same time, you want to make sure that there's balance between everything, right? And then it kind of, like Jason and Alex were saying, you're also having to put together scenes where, half of it's in Jason's head at the minute.
I remember coming to your office to act that one out too.
The pictures aren't made yet, the ents aren't, finalized yet, the Balrogs are finalized yet, and so I'm still having to try and inject tension into scenes and drama, and sometimes everyone else's work here means that it's a lot less difficult than it would be because the sets are so kind of realistic or so grounded the actors' performances and the costumes and the makeup. All of it means that I don't kind of have to worry about that kind of sort of thing so much. But when we're in editorial trying to work out what's really the story of this scene with this creature through this battle or whatever, things like Alex's lighting brief certainly help because you can kind of see, okay, all right, well, this is when the Balrog's going to come up, and then I'll put it together, and then me and Jason will sit in a room and talk to each other for
some arm wrestling happens.
Yeah, 25 minutes, and then Jason will have an idea, and I'll have an idea, and then Jason will have another idea, and eventually what you see on the screen sort of comes out. But it's kind of it's enhanced, certainly. It's made easier by all the jobs of the other departments. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're doing them justice and bringing your A game, and also, telling, making it exciting for the audience. And sometimes, it's really tough when we're looking at a stick or just a troll's foot. And trying to work out what the troll's going to do in a battle or whatever. But again, that was another scene that me and Jason talked about a lot over the course of the editing the battle episode. But yeah, I mean, there are challenges every day, but they're the kind of challenges you want to have.
I was gonna say also, Jason deserves he deserves recognition, not just for the visual effects, but for his acting. Because Jason acts out every creature in the show for all of us, and it's amazing because it actually does. I mean, we all know, like Jason, I mean, we base a lot of decisions on how we're going to shoot something based on your vision of the performance this creature is going to give, and you do such a great job of acting it out for us. It's actually, first of all, it's fun and funny, but it's also it's like it's really helpful, and it's really informative. So
it's the kind of thing that I have to burn every copy after the show is done.
But, Jason, we've got to see one. What's your best one, Jason?
I still remember, with the troll going into a room after dailies, and I just told my production crew, I said, I'm going to go into this screening room for just a second. They're like, do you need anybody to drive the machine? I'm like, no, this is me. Do you need somebody with a camera? No. So yeah, that's definitely the truth. And I think, it's true for so many people, kind of at every level too. Like, my animation supervisor would do the same thing, and individual animators would do the same thing. We're all trying to get into the heads of these creatures. And this is a place where we would really collaborate with stunts a lot, because if we're going to have a scene where a spider attacks somebody, it gets pretty boring if it's just only a spider just doing what a spider does. Where it becomes fun is when you get into those conversations saying, no, she wouldn't do that. She's a jerk. Here's what she would do to that one right now, and really have fun with getting into her head, her beady little head. It is fun to do. They're real to me, every single one of these creatures.
Okay. You can show us if you'd like, Jason, but what's your favorite creature to act out?
Oh man, I do love all of them, but I think maybe my personal favorite little film clip that I've got is me being attacked by the puppet of the spider that we built for the actor to interact with. I didn't make it. Let's just say that I didn't make it. I was vanquished by the spider in this puppeteering the spider while I'm being killed.
Talking to you guys, it's like you are like really a fellowship of the rings, aren't you? Like really, like it's going together. And Alex literally has 2 towers as well, so you're like ticking all the boxes. Alex, something I wanted to ask you was a big theme of this season is it's not strength that overcomes darkness, but light. How much does that speak to you as a cinematographer, and how much maybe does that sort of line inform how you approach the lighting this season?
It's a great question. It is something that's in the back of our head in every environment that we're in every scene, and how I approach the season. I heading into the season, knowing that the world of Middle Earth was in a darker place, I redesigned the color science of the camera from season 1. We went with a darker shooting LUT, which is essentially how the camera sees color or interprets color, which then, has this kind of domino effect of how it affects Luca's job and how it affects, Kristian's job and Barrie's job, because the fabrics will read a different color, the set walls will read a different color. And so this past season, I went with something with darker blacks, a little bit more kind of a green filmy tone in season 1, and then and then we had Mordor, and Mordor was its own thing, and we created almost it wasn't black and white, but it had its inspiration from black and white photography, and it was monochromatic and in many ways, and so that all of that was led by the story and the fact that darkness is taking over Middle Earth. And then at the very, very, very end of the season, I was able to kind of flip the switch. The last scene, with the elves kind of licking their wounds, but showing hope for the future, as they kind of stand over the cliff over the people who survived the battle. I overexposed the image. We added diffusion to the image, and we purposefully, Luca designed this beautiful dress for Galadriel to wear that was, ethereal in many ways. And again, like overlighting that in a way, letting the light really bounce off of that, adding diffusion, gave her this glow, which, thematically was kind of a turn at the very end of the season to show that, while it's been, not a great run of events for our heroes, there's still hope left.
I think going to the opposite end of the season with the start of the season, for us, that was, we almost shot it chronologically. So the opening scene of the coronation was really our first introduction to doing a lot of our work. And I think what Alex did with the lighting in the coronation scene at the start with Sauron was our first opportunity to see our orcs on screen, and it was a huge uphill challenge for us to sort of shoot that sequence at the start, because I think we ended up with about 60 stunt performers who were in prosthetic orc makeups, and I think that both, not only the environment was lit beautifully, but the characters were lit beautifully as well. And that there wasn't an awful lot of light source in there, but the source itself was beautiful. And I just remember our first shoot day, and we had all our characters on set, and we shot a lot of coverage over the principal actors. And then we got towards the latter part of the day, and we had something like half an hour left, and I think the principals had been wrapped. And I remember Alex just went through and picked out individually all these different orc characters. And I was standing with my team behind the monitor, and we were probably interrupting the filming because all of us were just going, oh, and just these close-ups were just, they were mind-blowing. And there was some in silhouette with just flames behind them, and then a little bit of top light, side light from beneath, and it was mesmerizing. So it was it's the first time in so long that we were actually looking at our work, and just the characters themselves have been lit so beautifully that we were, that was day one, and we just knew we were going to have a really enjoyable experience on this.
Luca, what was like something that you found a challenge or a joy in approaching season 2 of the show?
Well, joy was the entire season. Honestly, I had the best time working on it. Challenges, yes, every day we have challenges, but I think that when I was tasked to design new cultures or things that had never been seen before, that was big. So if we can make an example, when we had to come up with the stores, that was huge. So the amount of research and creativity, and also the teamwork involved in doing this. Kristian may remember that I was bugging him all the time and asking for pieces of rocks, stones, weeds, herbs, sand from the Canary Islands to just ground my characters in their environment. So that was a huge challenge, and coming up with the new shapes and the pointy hats and all of that. Another challenge for me that was huge. When you have a character like Tom Bombadil, everybody knows Tom Bombadil. It's a huge responsibility. And Tolkien, who never talks about costumes, was very specific. And he told me blue coat, yellow boots, blue feather. There was so much information about his costume. And so what can we do in order to create a costume which is not so obvious and still respect the guideline of the creator of this entire world? And Barrie, when you mentioned coronation, I was thinking about the other coronation, the Queen's coronation, Queen Miriam. Like, what do we do in order to create something new in this world that has already been explored in season 1, which is already so beautiful and perfect? What can we do to bring it to the next level? So that was a big challenge, but considering also the beautiful set and the trailing of the gown going down the stairs and stuff, all that was informing the choices of costumes. And talking about the close-ups again, the close-ups on the orcs. The orcs were already fantastic in season 1. So how can you bring this level of excellence to an even higher level? And so we explored. We had great sculptors, and we used them in order to add on bones from incredible fantasy animals and pieces of fish, pieces of add-ons for their armors. And so even the world of the orcs could just become even better. So challenges, like for everybody on this call, challenges happen every day. They can be in the script, but they can also happen at the last moment when you hear Luca on set. That's an absolute call for panic and heart attack. I'm sure you all know. Jason on set, Barrie on set, Kristian on set. Alex is always on set, so you're there. And to solve problems at the last moment, they could be replacement, they could be a costume malfunction, they could be something that needs to be changed at the last moment or be moved. So
A sheep that won't follow direction, that kind of stuff.
yes, we just live with challenges. This is our job. And I guess this is what we learned on day 1 of our profession when we were all on smaller movies. And the challenges are there to be solved, overcome, and used as an opportunity to do something even better.
I think I remember when I was in 7th grade when I read the first Lord of the Rings book, and then the movie came out later that year. Then I read the other 2 books, and then I watched the rest of the movies, and I was so enveloped in that world, and it's such a rich world and story that you guys are building into and speaking into. I guess how much when you're working on this show is it important to sort of focus on where it fits within the big picture of Tolkien, and how much it's helpful to know just focusing on that particular episode, that particular scene, that particular moment you're working on? Does anyone have a thought on that?
I will say that way lies madness.
Yeah.
I've tried that, and maybe the other guys can say more about this, but even though I said that way lies madness, I still daily try to do it. I feel like I'm the type of fan who loves when the details match. I love when the world is cohesive, and I love when you can think deeply about something and realize oh, well, if they were there, then they would already know about this thing. And I love that stuff. I love when the constellations in the sky are consistent, So on season 1, we did a whole project of creating that map based on every tidbit we could find from the letters that Tolkien wrote. I'd be curious to see what the other guys say about that, though.
From my point of view, I think that I obviously have to kind of be aware of how things are going to slot together in a kind of wider sense, rather than kind of looking scene to scene. But it's still nice to try and make those things inform one another. I've always got the showrunners to rely on as well, because they know where the story's been, they know where the story's going, and they work extensively with me and the other editors to make sure that grounding the story or telling the story in such a way that's going to pay off, and maybe not pay off in the next episode, pay off in the next scene, but might pay off in 2-3 seasons. luckily, I don't have to keep all that in my head because we've got we've got wonderful showrunners which are doing that for us. And you know, sometimes I'll make a change, not being aware that it might have ramifications for next season or the season after or what have you. You know, we'll have to solve a problem based on the fact that we don't want to ruin something, or we want to set something up for sometime in the future. So yeah, I've always got to bear that in mind, but at the same time, I'm glad that there's someone else who's got the kind of overview, and it doesn't all have to rest on my shoulders.
I would just, to add on to that too, I'd say, you know, that it's like we've tried, the showrunners and the producers and everyone at the very topmost level of this project have set up a sandbox that is trying to be as accurate to Tolkien as possible. And so that way, you know, we have a lore master here. We have many people in our production. Pretty much everyone on this call is well versed in Tolkien and are fans of the world and were before we joined this job. So we're trying to set up an environment where whatever creative decision is made, it still can feel like it's honoring within the kind of world of Tolkien, right? And so that way, you know, when it comes down to the day-to-day and the nitty-gritty, and, you know, say I'm on set with actors, with Charlotte, my director, and we need to make creative filmmaking decisions, story decisions to make, you know, we feel confident making decisions that make for a good scene and good storytelling that's still within the bounds of Tolkien, you know. Just like, you know, you can go back to the original trilogy. Peter Jackson changed a lot from those books because he wanted to make a good movie. And if he just did exactly what the book said, his movies probably would have been very mediocre. And so, you know, it's same with us where we have a sandbox where we're doing our best to honor what Tolkien is, you know, groundwork he's laid for us. And then we're also trying to make the best, you know, show that we can.
Yeah, no, the best way to describe all of this process and being faithful to Tolkien, but also to the script and to the showrunners and to the need of the actors and to all the other needs is like what we do best in this profession, in every department: dance, ballet, diplomacy, tact, balance, and trying to really make everybody happy. We couldn't certainly ignore Tolkien, but we were also working on a world of which there is not too much information. It is a sort of prequel that we're doing here. So there was a lot of room for fantasy and imagination. And again, trying not to really reinvent the wheel and making something crazy out of this world, but being faithful to Tolkien and to the script.
I think sometimes Tolkien left those gaps for us, honestly. Like when you read through the books, there's moments where it's just like, but why doesn't he say what color it is? Or, you know, and I honestly think that he is writing that way very intentionally, knowing what our brains will fill in with what we want to see. So everybody sees a different Middle Earth, and we all love it. You know, and it's tough when we are tasked with like taking one of those kind of quantum equations and collapsing it down to one thing, you know, like what is a Balrog? He says it's a creature of shadow and flame. You know, it's a lot of times there's enough ambiguity there to really go in lots of different directions. And that's another thing that's fun to work on together, you know, when we have those moments where we get to invent and decide and debate, you know, what these certain things could mean. It's a lot of fun.
Well, we started off by talking about the power that you find in making the show. And I thought we'd end with just thinking a bit about or sharing quickly the power of the story of the Rings of Power and what you think the most powerful thing is about the story you're all telling. So we're going to go around the grounds, and I want you each to give me one sentence about the power of the story of the Rings of Power.
I think that fundamentally, I think Tolkien, it was
the light against the darkness, trying to stay true to friendship and love, in trusting your friends and holding communities together, and being kind of with people who maybe not have the greatest strength and the greatest powers, and they have weaknesses in their societies and within themselves, and then they get drawn into temptation in all directions. And I think for me, when I started reading Tolkien as a young teenager, and I think it is the kind of a classic, the light versus the darkness. It is a classic story, and looking into his background, knowing his background of being inspired by the two world wars that he was kind of growing up in between. I think it is those things for me were both very inspiring to try and incorporate those things into what we created, to keep things real, so to speak, in terms of we were doing a great fantasy romp, but at the same time making sure that the feelings and the desires and the foibles and the fallacies within each character is there.
To me, also the power of giving every character, and not necessarily just the quote unquote good ones, their dignity. To just make an example, looking at the evil orcs, in understanding them, where they come from. I don't know, I had that kind of feeling at some point of making a movie and really understanding the story. Are they really evil, or are they just forced into their position of being evil? So trying with every character, when we design the costume, to not judge them, just making them the best they can possibly look, the most appropriate, trying to describe their subtleties and personality, but without judgment.
I'd say that I feel like Rings of Power is about the fact that there is inherent goodness in everybody, and that if channeled correctly, it can overcome corruption and corrupting influences. I think season 2 is totally about that. And I think not just Rings of Power, but the Lord of the Rings as well is about that. It's about the fact that given the right circumstances and the right collaborators, corruption can be overcome. Temptation, corruption can be overcome.
I think almost to add with what Joel's saying, I think talking about maybe I think for me, especially for season 2, I think one of the strongest storytelling powers, I think, is not only is it about corruption, but maybe I think season 2 is very much about the power of deception as well, especially with Sauron's story arc. And I think for me, as we got to episode sort of 6, 7, then 8, and the whole storyline of Sauron with Celebrimbor and the forging of the rings and the whole facade of what is going on outside, and he's completely oblivious to it. And I think just reading the script, for me, that was such a powerful and exciting part of season 2 for me. And the reveal of the window being smashed, and suddenly he's aware of what's going on outside, and there's this ridiculously huge battle unbeknownst to him. And I think, that power of deception and Sauron using his powers to, have this loop that is continuously played, within that chamber. And then he recognizes, oh, the mouse does this. So there's the drop of water here. There's the so-and-so. So I think it's, that powerful storytelling of Sauron kind of almost sort of using mind tricks to, the power of persuasion, I think, for me is probably really exciting thing about season 2 for me, I think.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Barry. That's my favorite scene in the whole season, actually.
Oh, wow.
The discussion in episode 7, when Celebrimbor finally stands up to Sauron. That was a big edit. It's a long scene, and you pretty much go through every human emotion, or elven emotion, I guess. From the start of it to the end of it, and I think it summarizes actually the whole season, as the kind of themes of the whole season, and also Charlie Pickers and Charles Edwards were just absolutely incredible in these roles. It was a pleasure to edit them, and I think that particular scene you're talking about is easily my favorite.
I think that one thing that was interesting to explore this past season was that being good is a choice, and you have to choose to be good, and that who we are is an accumulation of our choices, and that it's, even though there's in Tolkien's work, there's the struggle between the lightness and the dark, there's also shades of gray in between, and that Galadriel is struggling with that. She was deceived, and she's struggling with her own hubris is what led her to be deceived in many ways. And same with many other characters, same with Celebrimbor. And Sauron himself struggles within the shades of gray. He's not pure black, right? He's maybe as close as you can get, but I think that is something that makes it more real and more relatable as someone who's watching this story.
What I would say is, and it was so fun listening to everybody's comments, by the way, because there's something that resonates between all of them, and I knew what my answer was right when you asked, and it was fun to feel bits of it picked up in the individual things that people said. For me, the thing that has always struck me is the fact that I can see myself, and I think people can see themselves in the very best of the characters and the very worst of the characters. He didn't write it like one of those should be foreign to us. He wrote it like, I can feel myself in Gollum. I can feel myself in Sauron at times when I'm gaslighting these other people on the call. Like I can feel why they make the choices that they make. I think that the reason that's so compelling to me is because at the end of the day, if I can see myself in both, then what makes the difference between which one that I am? And that gets to what Alex was just saying. I think that's why this world is so powerful. It presents us both versions of ourselves and then says, how would you choose? And it's tough, What
would you do with a ring of power? Right?
Yeah. I'd put one on every finger.
Yeah.
Some people who are going to be having some choices in a couple of months are Emmy voters who will be deciding the nominees. So hopefully they choose the Rings of Power, the Prime Video series. It's an epic, exciting show that builds on this incredible world. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today and wish you all the best of luck for those upcoming Emmy nominations.